I'm at a phase in the documentary filmmaking where I have to start talking about it, have to start getting people aware of this project. How I got into it was not very traditional for filmmakers, but I think it is traditional for documentary filmmakers now to find themselves in a position that they want to make a film, they want to tell a story about, in my case, turned into cultures. The culture of the Antarctic, what I was calling ice recidivists, the people that would go back year after year to Antarctica and do that kind of work, are unique and crazy people. And so is, like the bio said, the landscape. I found that it affected the way I see the world. And I got into filmmaking. I was an environmental scientist that had been all over, usually in the worst corners of the world, the most toxic hazardous waste sites and Navy bases and landfills all over the world. Not all over the world, mostly here. There's plenty of them here. But I decided to move on and experience actually pristine landscapes, thus going to Antarctica scrubbing pots. I started scrubbing pots in Antarctica after about 10 years of being an environmental scientist. So how I ended up a filmmaker, I ended up managing a deep field camp, which takes a lot of disparate skills. And the filmmaker came in to make a short educational film. And as he's leaving, he got stuck for a week longer than he expected. And as he's leaving, he looked around and he shook his head and he said, "Man, I need 3 more months. 3 more months to film this place." You know, and I made fun of him. I looked around, I was like, there's 4 tents. You know, we live in little mountain tents you go camping with out in Antarctica, and a cook shack and a cargo line and a skiway, you know. And I said, you know, I'm not hiding anything from you. There's no alien aircrafts I'm hiding. There's nothing here. What do you mean you need 3 months? And he's like, you don't understand. And I did understand, actually, that I had gotten to that place after seeing some of the most strangest, most unique places on the planet, and I was working around people who were, you know, that modern human beings, you come back here, the corporate mind would consider crazy for even going there in the first place, putting their careers on hold and experiencing that, let alone doing it year after year after year until you're capable of managing one of these camps. So I was just realized that I had just followed a completely different path all the way to some of the strangest places in the world, and I just kept pulling on those threads, and decided that finally it was worth doing a documentary film about. So I, with the help from that filmmaker, in 6 weeks between wintering in Antarctica and going back for another season, I bought the camera and jumped in and started. And that's about 8-9 years ago. What ends up happening, though, is you develop these skills. I ended up learning how to get good footage out there. Then I had to learn that my sound stunk, you know, so I had to learn how to do sound, and I was going back more to do the documentary than to manage the field camp at the point. I got more interested in the documentary and telling that story than really working the field camp, but I had to do both. So this has been going on for 6 years, so it took the commitment to get in a car here, drive out to the Pine Ridge, you know, get our equipment together, make sure we had it, you know, data, everything. You know, these were, you know, remote projects. So we would go out and then we'd spend 2-3 weeks there, experiencing that and getting another interview, another, you know, more landscape, B-roll, always thinking about what we're trying to make, but really not knowing what we were going to end up with. And that's a difference, I think, between, you know, a drama, definitely a scripted drama, and documentary filmmaking. You really don't know what you're going to get. Most of that, all of that was shot in the first 2 years. And so we have, now that we're sitting down to actually do post-production, we've got a lot more to go. And that first sequence that we get a lot out of. He's sitting there in a shirt, and it's it's very, very nicely lit with tungsten light and everything like that. That's when I turned around for this one and looked at my partner, the woman who invited me out there, and said, this guy in this place, the Pine Ridge here, this is worth a feature-length documentary. And I told her later that I was going to keep coming back until they threw me off the reservation. Scared the hell out of her, but they never did. It turns out Sid and I got along really well, and that even though I only had book knowledge, I only had gone through years earlier, read books by his grandfather, actually, it turns out, that I was trying to figure out what his spiritual visions were like, and that I wasn't disrespectful. So I was trying to figure it out and put it in terms of modern physics and my science background, but I wasn't doing so refuting the validity of him. And as soon as he sort of figured that out, we got along really well, and he just kept inviting me deeper and deeper in. Like I say, it's gone on 6 years, and after 2 years, when I offered to do a vision quest, which is 2 days on a hill, exposed to the elements, meditating, praying, fasting, I again postponed kind of the documentary going into post-production because I had plenty of interviews for a 90-minute feature, even after 2 years. And all that hunting sequences, he'd invite us back, we'd go hunting with him, and then we'd interview him after the hunt and before the hunt and all that kind of stuff. So we really have his lifestyle of how he lives and survives on the Pine Ridge as a medicine man, because medicine men don't make any money, the authentic ones, as medicine men. So as we're capturing all that, I realized we could easily do a feature-length documentary. But again, he offered to allow me to dance in the Sundance, which is a 4-day ritual. I offered to pay him back for the education in a traditional way, which the Sundance and the Vision Quests are usually reciprocity for a healing, or something that he was an intercessor and had the spirits help the people get. Someone in the family will have to do the Sundance typically. If one person isn't healthy enough, a younger male will do it usually, or a woman. So then I postponed it at post-production again for 4 years because I just couldn't do both. I couldn't keep learning about that religion, coming up with better questions, interviewing him, and then going back and making a living, as I was doing all that. So and trying to figure out how to fundraise. And one of the amazing things I learned early on in this process, when I came back from Antarctica and decided to take seminars and classes and how to get a documentary finished, I realized after many years of managing big projects that if this documentary was a project, I would need 5 full-time people. So it's a juggling match. There's basically I had to decide that this was going to be, I was going to try and make it work and even learn how to raise money, even learn the social media. I had to, the reason why Sid actually, wasn't too irritated about how long it was taking was he was also starting to see some of the fruits of my social media efforts because people recognized him. He was go to powwows all over the country, and they would have seen this, the trailer and some of the other clips that I've put up. Many people would think it's unbefitting of a medicine man or a holy man, his drinking, and he's got 5 kids, from all over the country. He was an incredible athlete, and so he lived a wild life. All the time he was doing the Sundance for 28 years. He's covered in scars. He would go back to his old ways as a wild young man, and then he would be a medicine man. So, which is consistent, actually. It's culturally consistent. So, I'm a little off track there, but if you have any questions, yeah.
How did it come about? How did you and Sid and the project begin?
Essentially, I was at Chicago Filmmakers taking a documentary lab, trying to figure out to develop my Antarctic documentary. And so we were showing clips of each other's works, and it was kind of a community thing, that particular one. I took a lot of classes there. And one of the women who was taking classes there actually grew up, or father had a ranch near Sidney's, near the reservation. Actually, part of it's on the reservation. And she invited me. She said, "Hey, you want to help me? I want to do a short film about this medicine man, Sidney Hasnohorses."
I'm sorry, that I confused. Sidney Hasnohorse is his full name?
That's his name, yeah. His last name. A long story about how he got that name. His great-grandfather got that name. Has to do with the Pony Act and, a completely genocidal law called the Pony Act. They stole his grandfather's horses, so after they moved him to the reservation and some Native Americans were doing well, assimilating, becoming ranchers, and so forth, the government came in and said, well, you could use those ponies to go to war. They took all of his wealth, and they said, not only are we taking all of your ponies, but your name is now Sidney Hasnohorses, or it was Walks Underground his name was Walks Underground. So that's a consistent story throughout that year. I think it was 1915 to 20, the Pony Act. But they kept the name, they kept the Hasnohorses name, kind of to remind themselves of that ugly part of their history.
So you were in all these locations for a number of years. So how do you know when you're done? I mean, how do you know you need to keep going back? For that many years to finish your project.
I knew I was done. And then so the experience took over, I guess is the best way to put it. So I knew I was done filming. I knew I had enough to do something good, a good feature-length documentary. There was enough content for it. But personally, I decided that the experience of doing the Sundance, the experience of going back more and more and really researching what I was seeing and hearing in those ceremonies, trying to understand it better, and telling a deeper story was more important. But actually, the experience was more important. The reason I know I'm done now is I finished a 4-year ceremonial cycle. So I did the Sundance and Vision Quest for 4 years in a row, and got plenty of stuff. Now is the time to sit down and tell the story. Whereas it could have easily happened, 4 years ago at the beginning, like I said. But I realized to let the experience happen instead of, I became a Sundancer instead of a filmmaker for 4 years. Now I turned myself back around and became a filmmaker again.
So that's a lot of footage. It's just you and somebody else. Who's logging all that? How do you keep track of everything you shot?
So I've done it all, actually, and just gone. It's in pretty good shape, and I've just gone through right now. There's some problems attaching camera B to making sure, when I had A and B. But I'm attaching that all together, putting a spreadsheet together right now. Over the years, I have had people transcribe, so I've transcribed probably 70 or 80% of it. I've only got about 20 hours of transcriptions left out of, I think it's about 50 to about 70 hours. Besides the interviews, there's a lot of, putting the camp together, putting the ceremonies ground together. There's a lot of doing the tobacco ties, which are, intense. So, I started also talking about that and my experience on camera too. So there's a little bit of that too. Since I became a Sundancer, I decided I was going to try and hold it to make the film mostly our conversations and his voice. But it may come out that some of the things to my experience of actually putting the pieces together and actually describing how the world behind this one is similar to modern physics and the zero-point field. Yeah.
What are the tools? What's the tools that's needed to start the documentary?
I asked that filmmaker, what kind of camera will get me the highest quality for the least amount of money, because basically, and it was $3,000. It's a lot of money to me. And I wish I spent a lot more money on a tripod. Had smoother stuff because I'm sick of looking at the. I know it's a thing. It's a kind of a rustic effect and everything, and I'm pretty good at holding the camera steady. But I'm kind of done looking at that. I wish I upped my skills. So I'd say I asked an expert, did a lot of research, and then bought it. Bought what I thought I needed, and then sound gear came next. I actually shot a full season without extra sound, and then went back and took a sound class, and I was like, man, it sounds horrible.
What kept you there? It was actually a spiritual journey.
Yeah, there's definitely that. Yeah, spiritual, contemplative journey. So personally, like I said, the experience was experiencing a natural religion. So I've always been on journeys. I've done long contemplative, 10-day silent meditations a couple of different times. So I, just part of my personal journey was very spiritual, very conscious oriented. And that's how I knew about his grandfather. So when his main teacher was a guy that I actually had read some of the books written about him 10 or 15 years before, and it's always been amazing. A lot of amazing stories came out because I was trying to figure out his gifts and his skills, and what is a metaphysical experience? What are we seeing in these? Are they tricks? Because there's a lot of wild things that you wouldn't think are possible, that modern human beings are trained not to believe anymore, especially scientists like myself, happen. And we sit there and we think it's. So I was going through all of that, all of the doubt, even as open-minded as I thought I was like, I get to a point and I'm like, oh, I'm not that open-minded. That was shocking to me, actually, how much I tried to find the tricks. I was trying to find the tricks. After 3 or 4 years, I'd find myself in a ceremony or a sweat lodge, and I'm like, damn, quit with that. Just experience it, But
These students are about to graduate pretty soon. So what are the qualities and the characteristics you seek in, say, a camera person or production assistant that would join you in these unique climates?
You just got to be ready for everything. You got to work hard, and you got to do a lot of different things. When something comes up, something new that you're not expecting to be part of your job, you just got to do it. It's kind of like the same thing I would expect in someone in a field camp. Like I said, the field camps I managed, there were 3 of us. 3 people had to live and survive for, 3 or 4 months. You can't decide that you don't want to cook. If I take on an intern, they're gonna start transcribing, probably transcribe, And if I pulled in a camera crew, I would eventually ask them to transcribe it. You know, so being open to doing any little part of the process, because there's so much to do. What I would want as a director, if I were to have a crew, is to someone to take that responsibility of seeing new compositions, of setting it up, of miking the room properly, taking that off my mind so that I could do an interview, so that I could do a proper interview.